Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my Missive Tirna Scythe guide for War Within Season 1. It's coming back from the Shadowlands for this season, and quite a few things have changed, so be sure to look out for those. I will start off with the very first thing in this dungeon, which is the first gate. In order to open this, you need to be either Herbalism 25, Night Elf, Druid, or Tauren. Those are the only 4 ways to open this that I know of. If you can't open it, then you're going to be in for a bit of a rough time. You have to go over here and do an extra pull. There's also some main stat mushrooms you're going to miss out on later. So ideally you have one, but you know, early on in the season, there's going to be a lot of people not having those things available, so you gotta work with what you got. Our group, however, does have that, so we're going forward here. This first pull is pretty standard. You have access to it. It's going to be 5 of these Spike Claws plus this. By the way, up to the first boss, I think nothing changed from Shadowlands. It's just the mobs are scaled differently, obviously. So we'll talk about all these mobs. So the Struss Spike Claw is the first one we'll cover. These are the smallies of the pack. They're just patrolling around, but we pull them in. They do have a jump, which jumps on anyone not in melee, so try to stack in melee while you're fighting them. And they also have this purgeable buff. If you can purge it, don't. What this does is when they die, they drop a swirly on the ground. Anything in the swirly takes increased damage, and it's a curse. It doesn't really matter too much because you shouldn't be taking it as a player, but anything in the swirly takes increased damage. So as a tank, you want to like make sure you're not in it, and also you want to make sure the mobs are in it. Also, there's the villager. So the villager has 2 moves. One is the frontal bewildering pollen. Basically just dodge it. If you do get hit, I think it's a dispellable, but it will disorient you and do a bunch of damage. So your group is going to be in a lot of danger from mobs mailing them as a tank. It also has overgrowth, where it picks a player and starts channeling on them. At the end of it, it will stun them. There's also the harvester, which is your average spam caster. He just keeps casting Spirit Bolt on a random target. He does have a move called Harvest Essence, which channels a heal on himself while doing a bunch of damage to everyone, so make sure you stop that. There's also these Soul Cleaver mobs, which are basically hitting the tank really hard. They have a tank buster called Soul Split, which increases your damage taken and does a lot of damage just baseline, so make sure you are watching out for that when you're fighting these. They also buff themselves with Hand of Thros, which applies a buff to them, increasing their attack speed, but more importantly, if they're hitting the tank while that buff is active, they are healing. So generally how it goes in this pack is you're unable to kite while these Spike Claws are alive. Since if you kite, then the Spike Claws will move, and then your group who's trying to stack in melee won't be able to do that. So generally you want to be standing still until these die. Once these die, you want to be cutting out the Hand of Thros. All the meanwhile, we're doing inner reputation on the Harvester, dodging Bewildering Pollen, and then this guy also channels Overgrowth. It's on our Evoker, so he does something really cool here. It does a bit of damage, by the way, when it's channeling, so make sure you pop it personal. At the end of the cast, since he's about to get stunned, he instead casts Breath of Eons. And while he's casting that, he's immune to stun, so he actually immunes the stun here. A lot of his stun immunes work like that, like IBF from the DK would work, so would AMS, as long as you use it at the end. So we just do a bunch of damage to this pack. As those die, they drop these swirlies on the ground, which applies the curse. Since they're dead, now I can kite Hand of Thros, so the next time these cast Hand of Thros, I'll probably be kiting. Here we are, we can see the debuff on them since I track it on nameplates, and I'm walking away. Well, my group slows them down. Alright, so that is this pack. Next we do this skip. The pack we skip is kind of nasty to play, although I do foresee a lot of pugs like unable to do the skip. If you have a Demon Hunter or Evoker or a Rogue, you can skip this relatively easily with Imprison, Sleepwalk, or Sap, or even Shroud. If you don't have that, you can always Invis pot, but I would expect early season people are going to be potting the first pull and not thinking about that, so just be ready to fight this. It's way better than to like actually fight it than to fail the skip and have like a massive fiesta afterward. After that, our strategy in this run is to go like into this room and pick up mushrooms before we do our next pull. If you want, you can just like fight these 4 together and just deal with the bolts as they go off. That is probably, it's definitely gonna be slower than the route we take, but it's probably gonna be a lot safer too for pug runs. So we CC1, and we tag both Bowbreakers, and we go into this. The reason we do this is because the way to spawn the boss is by killing the Bowbreakers. Boss can't spawn until these are dead, so we pull them like as early as possible. We also CC1 caster because having 2 casters spamming bolts in this pull is like kind of rough, so we just make it easier that way. So these Bowbreakers are new mobs. They weren't in the previous pull. They cast an ability called Bramble Burst, which you can see on the ground here. Basically, every time he casts it, anywhere someone is standing, it drops these brambles on the ground. If you're in them, you get a really big slow, and it also does some damage to you, so just make sure to pre-move that, especially as the tank, because there's these 2 Bowbreakers that are doing massive melee damage to you, and also the Soul Cleavers that hurt as well. This pull is kind of rough for tanks. Make sure you don't overly move too much, though, because there is a caster in the pack, so you don't want to like move him too much to make him unstacked. Your group also probably has like a lot of stuff that is targeting the ground, it does damage. So ideally you're just pre-moving every Bramble Burst and then stay still for the rest. So that is this pack. Once these Bow Breakers hit 50, they do cast an ability called Furious Thrashing, which does AoE damage to the group. Depending on the healer you're playing with, it may be better to either push them staggered, like focusing one down, or to push them at the same time. I think generally Evokers prefer if they're pushed at the same time, and some other healers prefer them pushed separately. If I was playing in a Pug, I would definitely be pushing them separately because pushing them at the same time can potentially be lethal damage. And if your healer's not ready, then you will probably die. So it's better to, if your healer's like in a Pug and you don't know how ready or prepared they are, then definitely just push them separately. Focus one down first. Once the first caster's dead, I do go over to pull the second caster, and then we're on to the boss. So this boss is one of the more annoying ones in the season. The reason is, the way it works is, if you look at their health values, this Droman has way less health than Ingram Malik, but Ingram Malik becomes almost immune to damage like 30 to 40 seconds into every phase. So the goal is to get as few phases as possible. If you get a 3 phase, that can often mean it's a deplete in high keys. In lower keys, their health doesn't really scale that crazy. So if they have lower health, then you can almost guarantee a 2 phase. But if you ever get a 3 phase, it's like minus over a minute. So it's kind of bad for time. As far as their actual abilities, Ingram Malik just does spammable bolts, which you can kick. The Droman does Bewildering Pollen, which is the same frontal as before. They also have Tears of the Forest, which is a bunch of swirlies that get dropped on the ground. We'll see in a sec here. So he casts Force Compliance on the Droman, and then the Droman casts Tears, which is all these swirlies. The swirlies do drop on players, so you can, if you're a melee, you can like stand on one side and then go to the other. If you're ranged, you want to try not to bait them in the path that your tank is planning to kite. Once this is about 37 seconds into the phase. The boss kind of has weird spell queuing, so it's not always exactly 37 seconds. He does cast Embrace Darkness, so this is the like immunity to damage that I was talking about earlier. It's not actually full immunity. I think it's like 10% damage taken, like 90% reduced. After he casts this, he also starts ticking damage on the whole group. So it is a bit of a DPS check. If this is like in this phase for too long, then you're probably going to wipe depending on your healer. One possible strategy is to like focus Ingra until he casts that, then focus the tree, just so you get less phases potentially. This Repulsive Visage is also a fear. You want to try not to get feared like into another pack or out the room or into some ground. We are playing with a Shaman though, so we have Tremor Totem, so we just immune the fear anyway. This is another one of those swirlies. So we start on this side of the boss and then we like slowly move to the other side. This can be pretty spicy playing the strategy this way. Oftentimes you just have to straight up run away, but that's really bad for downtime or uptime. So you know, have to weigh one advantage with the other. Once the tree gets phased to 20%, he puts a massive debuff on the boss. I believe it's 300% increased damage taken for about 13 seconds. And you want to do as much damage as possible in this burn. You want to only get 2 of these burns, basically. If you get more than that, then basically the dungeon is going to take too long. So we do the burn, then he reshackles the tree, and we're back to phase 1. Rinse and repeat. Hopefully you don't have to do this twice. If you have to do it more than that, like I said, massive time loss. So this is the second time, and then we burn him again. He's at 5%. So I think usually the threshold here is like below 10%. It's okay to hit Ingra. Above 10, you should be hitting the tree again and go for a 3 phase. If you focus Ingra and he ends up casting Embrace Darkness, then that can make your strategy really awkward because like killing him through that is quite difficult. All right, after the first boss, we're going to start running into the reworked mobs. This first pull hasn't really changed much since Shadowlands, but there are a few things going on. So first, there's this seed on the left. Anyone can click this, not just like Night Elf or Druid or anything. And it sets the checkpoint. If you die, make sure you're going to want this checkpoint set, so make sure someone does that. Also, there's another thing. The boss is going to go through one of these doors, so you can avoid having to solve the mist puzzle on the first 1 to 2 doors if you just look where the boss is going. Number 3, so the first pull is 2 mobs here. Certain classes have abilities that can pull through the wall. So right now, DK is bugged. You can do it with Focus Grip as long as you're targeting a mob through the maze. Warlock is a pet class, so they can just send their pet over to do it. So can Hunter, and then so can any pet class basically. And also some long-range classes that have high mobility including Demon Hunter and Moonkin, can jump up here. If you get high enough, then you can use like long-range skills to pull over the wall here as well. Generally, you want to not have the first pull be 2 mobs. There's also another thing going on, by the way, when you haven't even pulled the pack yet. So these two start off by roleplay fighting these Druss Soul Cleavers, and they're at 85%. If you don't pull them immediately, then once the RP completes, they're full healed. If you do, however, pull them while they're fighting, they don't heal and they're at 85% during the pull, which is, you know, a nice boost in speed. So I start by fighting these. Then I think our DK pulled these, and I just go aggro them as soon as they get through the wall. So these are the reworked mobs now that we're here. The Defender now has a move called Expel and another one called Mistward. So you see this one just finished casting Mistward. It drops this poop on the ground. The initial swirly doesn't actually hurt, by the way, but you can stand in that. But you don't want to be in the Mistward after it's dropped. It does massive damage if you're ever inside it. Also, if the mobs are inside Mistward, then they take reduced damage. I think it's 30%. And they have another ability called Expel, which one should cast relatively soon. So here is the Expel. You can see this one is picking our Warlock. He's about to Expel. It does a decent amount of damage and knocks him back. Boom. Also, there's this Guardian, which has also been reworked. For the Guardian, you can see this buff here that I'm tracking on target auras. He has 5 stacks. Basically, if there's 6 mobs in the pack, then he has 5 stacks. If there's 4 mobs, he has 3. Basically 1 stack for every ally, and it's 2% increased damage per stack. He also has a tank hit now called Anima Slash, which does magic damage and also has a dot, leaves a dot behind. And also his melees, as well as the melees of the Defender, are just really hit hard compared to other mobs. So in general, tanks, when they see Guardians, are going to be in a lot of trouble in this area. Also, this Stalker has been changed a little bit. He doesn't target anymore with his bite. It shows he's targeting the tank, and then it just goes on a random person. On top of that, he also cannot be stopped. So if you stop the Mistveil bite mid-cast, like if you stun him, he'll just recast it right afterward. The Shaper hasn't been changed. It's the same mob from Shadowlands. Just has one interrupt called Bramblethorn Coat. If it goes through, then it puts a purgeable shield on an enemy, and if you hit into that shield, which everyone always does, you'll get a really big dot on you that also roots you, so just kick him. And if you fail to kick, then try to have someone perch. So if we were paying attention before, we would have seen that Mistcaller did indeed go left. So we go through the door here. If you're unfamiliar with the game, it is the same as Shadowlands, although I think there are a couple new maze patterns. We'll just play this since there's no new mobs while we talk about it. Basically, every time you walk over one of these pillars with mists on them, there's 4 per every room. It'll show you like a symbol, and those symbols can be different in 3 different ways. So they can be a leaf or a flower, they can also be empty or filled, and they can also have a ring or have no ring. And the correct door is the one that has a symbol that isn't shown anywhere else. So basically, like for instance, let's say these 3 have rings and the last one has no ring. Well, that last one is the correct answer, right? Because it's the one with the unique symbol. There's a couple tricks you have with this. For instance, if you see 2 that have 2 pillars that have 2 of the same attributes. For instance, let's say this pillar was like full leaf, no circle, and then this one was full leaf circle, then you know that none of them can be the correct answer. It has to be the other one. So that is one potential trick. There are a lot of tricks, and probably there will be a weak order eventually that just solves the maze, so we're not going to go too in depth there. Most of this maze is kind of just the same mobs. There is one mob that we haven't seen yet. Also, there's this Tender. He just casts a kickable heal. By the way, all the casters in this maze, the Tender and the Shaper, if you stop their cast instead of kicking it, it will recast. So be very careful your kick doesn't get sniped. As I think we just saw there, the kick got sniped by a knockup and then we re-kicked it. So this whole time we are doing the maze while fighting the packs. Tank is somewhat in trouble. This Stinger is also a mob that we haven't discussed. It applies a debuff called from Anim Injection. You see that? It just applies a debuff on our DK, and you can dispel it. It is a dispellable debuff, so make sure your healer is on top of that. If your healer dies, then you need to use other ways of dispelling, like Dwarf or Mass Dispel, etc. By the way, any pack in the maze with double Guardian, your tank is going to be in danger, so also watch out for that. Every maze also has at least 1 mini-boss. So there's 3 mini-bosses. One is the frog that we see here, another one is a dragon, and another one is the plant. So the dragon is the toughest one. It drops a pool that you need to move it out of, otherwise it heals, and it also applies a stacking debuff on your tank, increasing damage taken. This frog is definitely the most annoying one, but it can be played. So it has 3 abilities, I think. 1 is the tongue, which basically it's a frontal, just move away. 2, it has the jump. Our guy just died to aggro there, unfortunate. Also, we pull it back through because the frog is kind of easy. It has a jump here, you can see him doing it. This tongue, by the way, is very, very scary. Make sure you don't get hit. And he also does poisonous secretions, I believe. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe he only has 2 abilities. Okay, never mind. He has poisonous secretion, so 3 abilities, which is just a circle. You have to walk away. So he has tongue, the leap, and the secretions. No actual, like, damaging ability other than those. They're all, like, avoidable. No unavoidable hits from him. The rest of these mobs we've already gone over. There's a Guardian, Shaper, Tender, and a Defender. If you play with nameplate colors, it can be very useful in this area because it's kind of confusing sometimes with a bunch of these mobs. It's kind of hard to tell what's in the pack if you don't play with colors. But if you do play with colors, it's kind of easy to see what's going on. All right, so we finish off the pack. We solve the maze. More of the same pack, so we're not going to go too much over them. Then we get to the boss. So if you have a DK or a pet, you can pull track to the boss. However, note that this is Very, very scary, especially for the tank, because most of these packs have double Guardian. So you're fighting 2 Guardians with the boss, which also does heavy melee damage. I would recommend only doing this with Lust, and also only do this if you're super confident. It's going to be very hard for a lot of tanks to survive this pull. Also worth noting is that the boss does a cast that only the tank can interrupt. So make sure you're not interrupting other stuff as the tank. You must interrupt the boss on Patty Cake. So that said, the boss has some abilities. One of them is Patty Cake, which you just saw. You just have to interrupt it as the tank. If you don't interrupt it, you get disoriented and eat like a massive hit, so you'll probably die even if you don't get disoriented. She also casts Freeze Tag. As we see, it spawns this Vulpin here, which fixates someone. If that Vulpin ever reaches them, then it does an AoE stun around them and also does massive damage. So if this ever hits your tank on this pull, you are just dead. So make sure this doesn't ever land. You can slow it, you can CC it, but generally people like to put like their dots on it to funnel, quote unquote. So just slow it and cut it around, usually is how it goes. Boss also has another ability called Dodgeball, which you'll see here. Boom. It basically picks wherever everyone is standing. It shoots one of these arrows at where they are. Don't get hit, otherwise it does a lot of damage. One new feature that they brought in the War Within is these dodgeballs are able to damage the boss mobs, not like the trash that we're pulling extra on top of it, but the ads it spawns in intermission. Also, the fox will get hit by dodgeball and take extra damage. All right, so we are finishing off the trash at 70 and 40 and 10. The boss goes into intermission, so here we see she's casting Guessing Game. This is the intermission. Boom. So in Guessing Game, she spawns 4 ads around the room. You have to find the correct one. It's the same rules as in the maze. It's the one that's like has a unique symbol, which is unique in some way. We decide that it's this one. I'm like kind of busy tanking them off, so I'm not paying too much attention to it. But we do decide that it's purple. We go here and then we kill it. Until this is dead, you can see they have 8 stacks here. They do get a stacking damage increase, and they're pulsing damage on the whole group. So this is kind of like the heal check of the fight / DPS. By the way, the boss's dodgeball does hit those ads, so you kind of want to try to line up the dodgeball to hit them. Once the trash dies, the boss is relatively tame. It does have like pretty hard hitting autos, but yeah, just make sure you interrupt Patty Cake. Don't let freeze tag hit you. By the way, if you have Abomination Limb, it can be very scary. Probably just don't push it at all on this boss. Otherwise, you have run the risk of gripping the Vulpin. Vulpin is kind of weird in that certain abilities work and some don't at displacing it. For instance, Typhoon just slows it. It doesn't knock it, but Grip will move the mob. This is another Guessing Game again. We figure out pretty quickly that it's purple, and we just go there and DPS it down. All right, so that is this boss fight. After the boss dies, she will open up the way to proceed further. Be careful jumping down there. There's like some random logs here that you can land on that aren't the water that can kill you. There is a chestnut here. I believe only Night Elves, Druids, and Herbalists and Taurens can click this, although I might be mistaken about that. It sets the checkpoint again. You will want to do this because if anyone dies, they pretty much can't release unless you get the checkpoint. This pack we skip almost all the time now. The Staghorn is really nasty. He has a new move called Acid Nova that basically makes so you can only pull one of them at the same time. We almost always want to skip this Acid Gullet with either Prison, Sleepwalk, Sap, whatever. Also, some classes can go over the ledge here, either with jumps or with gate or something like that. The next pull we do is pretty standard. Most of these mobs aren't changed too much. It's just the Staghorn that's changed. So he still has the same 2 interrupts, the shield and the heal, but he also has a new move called Acid Nova. So watch, just keep your eye on the Staghorn. That's the shield, we interrupt it. We also pull these flyers in somehow. This is the new ability called Acid Nova. Once it goes off, you'll see, boom, massive damage to the whole group, and also this dot. This is kind of the heal check, and also this dot is increasing damage you take by 20% from all nature sources. So you basically can only pull one of these at once. If you pull multiple, you're almost certainly dead. Also featured in this pack are the Acid Gullets. So these pick a player with volatile acid, and it puts a dot on them. While you have this dot, you're also damaging all allies around you, so you want to spread out a bit. There's also this Scourger, which puts the swirlies on the ground that you can see that are dodgeable. And these Reavers, ideally you don't pull these. They jump to random people and apply a poison, which can be very scary when overlapped with a Staghorn. And there's also these larvae. When they die, they have like no health. When they die, they drop these puddles on the ground, which tick like crazy fast. So you can see these puddles over here. Actually, it's kind of hard to see them, but if you walk over them, you will take a lot of damage. Hopefully they improve the visual, like this is a puddle you can see here. If you walk over this, you take a lot of damage. Very scary, especially for melees. This is the swirly from the Gorger here. And that is the pull, basically. This is a relatively tough pull. After that, we usually go into the next pull because it has 1 Staghorn. And these Staghorns are very, very dangerous. They must be killed quickly and probably not pulled with too many other mobs, especially if you don't have cooldowns. So we finish off this Staghorn. Once this dies, the rest of the mobs are kind of easy. I tend to pull this in a boss. If you don't want to pull this in a boss, it's fine. Just probably do pull double though because they're kind of easy. These mobs do melee relatively hard. Make sure you have a cooldown running as the tank. Otherwise, you're going to take like too much damage. If you do have to kite, those mobs are kiteable. The Staghorn is immune to CC, but the others are all CCable. So you can like stun or grip and then just walk away. He pulls into the boss, Tredova. So Tredova has changed a little bit. This swirly mechanic is the same. Basically, it drops a swirly on every player, and then it also drops extra swirlies based on how you dodged. So for instance, if you just take one step, then the next swirly after that is going to be like one and then one right there. Super clean and easy to dodge. If you like jump away, like if I infernal leaped all the way over here or blinked or something, then the swirly after that would also follow the same behavior. So make sure you don't do that. Otherwise, you could grief someone later on in the fight. I think this death was to larvaes that died and just spawned puddles that were hard to see. So this boss also casts some larvae summons. I think it's called accelerated incubation. These larvae fixate someone. At some point, which is kind of unclear, they stop fixating and they respond to aggro. So just try and get aggro on them. Once the fixate's over, they'll all run at you as the tank, and hopefully that's what happens. They also do drop a puddle when they die, so watch out for that. Another change they made to this boss is Mind Link. So this Mind Link existed before, but now it only goes on the tank. Every single time he casts Mind Link, it's on the tank. So always be ready for it. We're gonna see the mechanic now. He casts Mind Link on the tank, and then I'm playing Vengeance, so it's pretty easy. I just jump out and it breaks the link. He also casts this poison directly after the Mind Link. If you are max melee, you can kind of hit him like on the corners here. If you're certain parts of the circle, you're unable to hit him, but if you're like standing on this part of the circle where my mouse is, you can hit him. That's mostly the fight. He casts this, and then you just walk out and then max melee hit him. And for the ads, you kind of want to get aggro and try to stay close to your healer when you're getting fixated by the ads. And that's mostly the boss fight. He also casts consumption when he gets to, I believe it's 70 and 40, I'm not 100% sure. Okay, it's actually at 68, I guess, that he casts consumption. So he walks to the middle and starts eating whatever this is. What actually happens is he's dropping all these swirlies around and he's casting this shield on himself. You need to break this shield in order to kick consumption. I'm pretty sure it actually auto interrupts now when you break the shield. But once you break the shield, he stops casting. This is doing massive pulsing AoE to the whole group, and also dropping these swirlies, making it kind of hard to heal. So just try and break the shield ASAP. As a healer, obviously make sure you have cooldowns ready for this, and this is also a good time to use your personal defenses as well. But once the shield breaks, we're back to the other phase. As the tank, run away from the group or jump out for Mind Link. As melee, stay out for consumption. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole boss. Generally, you're going to be dropping poop where the boss is. So as a tank, you kind of want to be moving the boss like roughly around the edge of the room in a circle in order to like drop poop and then move to a clean area. But honestly, most of the time, people just heal their position. So you're kind of just shackled to how your group is standing because of the Mind Link mechanic. But ideally, I think that is how the boss is played. So at 35, I guess, he casts Consumption again, and then he just put the rest of his mechanics on repeat. So that's this boss. We are lucky enough, by the way, to have count when we actually pulled this boss. I think it's mainly because we pulled so much extra through the maze. They did recently rework all the count in Mist, so it's actually kind of unlikely that you pull this boss and then you are full on count. If you're not, then after this boss, you kind of have to clear the rest of the area, which involves a lot of Staghorns, so be ready for that. Also, we ended up not timing this key, but this is like one of the only footages of a full Mist I could find, so that's that. So that is the Mist guide. Thank you everyone for watching. Peace out.